OpenAI was built to prevent a dangerous AI race. Then Sam Altman fired the starting gun himself. He built the fire alarm to warn the world. 3 years after founding it, one of its own co-founders would walk away, furious that the lab he helped build wasn't moving fast enough. That's coming. But first, you need to understand what OpenAI was actually built to stop. In December 2015, a small group of technologists and investors announced a new kind of research lab. Not a company chasing profit. Not a product racing to market. A nonprofit built on a single promise: to make sure artificial intelligence, if it ever became powerful enough to reshape the world, would benefit all of humanity, not just the handful of corporations racing to build it first. The founders came from wildly different worlds. Elon Musk, already famous for electric cars and rockets, warned publicly that AI could become more dangerous than nuclear weapons. Sam Altman, a young entrepreneur who had spent years running Y Combinator, the accelerator that helped launch some of Silicon Valley's biggest names, shared that fear. But believed the answer wasn't to stop the technology. It was to build it first and build it right. Together with a handful of researchers poached from Google, they pledged over $1 billion to the new lab, though much of that pledge would never actually be collected. It didn't matter yet. The point wasn't the money. The point was the promise. Unlike the giants already racing toward artificial intelligence behind closed doors, this lab would publish everything it discovered openly for anyone to see and use. There was no product, no customers, no plan to ever make money. Just a warning, dressed up as a research lab. For the first couple of years, almost nobody outside a small circle of AI researchers paid attention. OpenAI published dense academic papers. It trained a program to beat professional players at Dota 2, a video game far more complex than chess. It built a robotic hand that could solve a Rubik's Cube one-handed. To most of the world, it looked like an eccentric science project funded by rich men with a guilty conscience about the technology they themselves were helping to create. But a warning is only as strong as the people willing to keep believing in it, and that belief was about to be tested from the inside. #bloke2 Chispa Fundadora la Mission. The mission was deceptively simple to say and almost impossible to keep: ensure that artificial general intelligence, AI that could match or exceed human ability across nearly any task, would be developed safely, and that its benefits would be shared broadly rather than hoarded by whoever got there first. It was a mission built on fear. The fear that a handful of companies, racing each other in secret, would build something transformative without any obligation to the public that would eventually have to live alongside it. OpenAI's answer was almost paradoxical: build the technology anyway, but do it in the open, publish the research for competitors to read, and stay a nonprofit so no shareholder could ever pressure it into cutting corners on safety too. Hit a quarterly target, but there was a catch nobody had fully solved yet. Building cutting-edge artificial intelligence is extraordinarily expensive. Thousands of specialized chips, running for months, consuming electricity on the scale of a small city, costing tens of millions of dollars for a single training run, a figure that would only climb from there. A nonprofit funded by pledges and goodwill was never built to survive that kind of spending. The mission needed money. The mission's own rules weren't designed to raise. So what happens when keeping your promise means you might have to break it? #bloke3 Fracassos y Contratiempos. In February 2018, the tension finally broke. Elon Musk, one of the co-founders and by far the largest source of funding, left the board. The official explanation cited a conflict of interest. His own company, Tesla, was investing in AI for self-driving cars. But reporting at the time told a sharper story. Musk had reportedly grown frustrated with OpenAI's pace against Google and proposed taking direct control of the lab himself. When that proposal was rejected, he walked. Over time, he largely stopped funding the organization he'd helped launch. The lab had lost one of its most famous names and a significant share of its promised money in the same stroke. Employees who had joined for a bold, well-funded mission now found themselves inside an organization whose founding pledge was suddenly worth far less than advertised, while the cost of the research they were doing kept climbing every single year. Some of OpenAI's own researchers began quietly wondering whether the lab could keep its promise of staying independent from the very companies it was competing against. or whether independence itself was a luxury it could no longer afford. This was the moment the organization built to prevent a reckless AI race had to make its own reckless bet, not on technology, but on its own identity. Stay pure to the nonprofit ideal, and risk running out of resources before the mission was ever realized. Or change the rules that had defined the lab since day one, and risk becoming exactly the kind of company it was founded to stand against. There was no version of the future that didn't require choosing one. In 2019, OpenAI restructured. It created a capped profit company nested inside the original nonprofit, designed to let it raise real investment capital, while, in theory, capping how much investors could ever collect. With everything beyond that flowing back to the original mission, safety was the mission, speed became the strategy. Microsoft stepped in with a landmark investment, reported at roughly $1 billion in that first round, eventually growing into a partnership worth many times more, in exchange for close access to OpenAI's technology and priority use of Microsoft's cloud infrastructure to train it. The organization, built on distrust of unaccountable tech giants, had just built a direct financial bridge to one of the biggest tech giants on the planet. Critics inside and outside the AI research community noted the irony almost immediately. But the money bought something the mission couldn't survive without: the computing power to build a series of increasingly capable systems, eventually known simply as GPT. Each version was bigger than the last, more text, more parameters, more chips, running longer, at a cost climbing into the hundreds of millions per run. Nobody outside a small circle of researchers had any idea what was coming next. Block 5, Crecimiento Acelerado. By 2022, OpenAI had spent years releasing GPT models mainly to developers, through an interface most casual internet users never saw and would never have known how to use. Internally, the plan for the next release, a conversational version, one that let ordinary people simply type questions and get answers back, was treated as something closer to a quiet research preview than a genuine product launch. A way to gather feedback, not a bid to change the internet overnight. Nobody at OpenAI was preparing for what was about to happen. Nobody at Google was either. On November 30th, 2022, that preview went live under a new name, Chat. No marketing campaign, no launch event, no keynote, no ad spend. Just a link on a blog post, and an invitation to try it for free. For the first few days, it felt like any other niche tech release, a curiosity shared between developers and AI researchers on Twitter. And then it stopped feeling small. People who had never touched an AI tool in their lives were suddenly asking it to write poems, debug code, plan meals, draft breakup texts. Screenshots spread faster than anyone at OpenAI could track them. Teachers were talking about it in staff rooms. Parents were asking their kids what it was. For the first time, artificial intelligence wasn't an abstract headline about the future. It was a tool sitting open in a browser tab on 100 million computers right now. Within 5 days, it had 1 million users. Within 2 months, estimates suggested it had passed 100 million active users, making it, at the time, the fastest growing consumer application ever recorded. A milestone that had taken Instagram and TikTok years to reach, achieved by Chat in weeks. Somewhere in Silicon Valley, a decade of quiet AI research had just been overtaken by a research preview nobody had planned to be a launch. Google, the company widely assumed to be furthest ahead in AI after 10 years of investment, was reportedly caught completely off guard. Internal reports at the time described the code red inside the search giant, as engineers scrambled to accelerate projects that had been sitting quietly in research labs for years, suddenly forced into the open by public pressure nobody there had anticipated. The safety-focused lab that once promised to prevent a reckless AI race had just built the very race it feared. And for the moment, it wasn't just winning it, it had made every other company in the industry play by its clock. Block 6, Crisis Mayor-wide Reinvention. By November 2023, OpenAI's nonprofit board still held ultimate legal authority over the fast-growing, multi-billion-dollar company operating underneath it, including the power to remove its own CEO, no matter how successful he'd become. On Friday, November 17th, the board did exactly that. Sam Altman was fired, effective immediately, with the board citing a vague loss of confidence in his candor, and almost no public details beyond that single sentence. For a company that had just changed how the world used the internet, Nobody outside a small room of board members had seen it coming. The fallout was immediate, chaotic, and unlike anything Silicon Valley had witnessed from a company this size. Employees threatened to resign en masse unless Altman was reinstated. Reports suggested over 90% of OpenAI's roughly 770 staff signed a letter demanding the board's resignation. Microsoft, OpenAI's largest investor, publicly offered to hire Altman directly, along with anyone who wanted to follow him, effectively threatening to absorb the company's entire talent base overnight if the board refused to reverse course. Employees who had spent years building something they believed in watched it threaten to dissolve overnight, not because of a hack, a lawsuit, or a failed product, but because of a boardroom decision almost nobody outside that room understood. For 5 days, the most talked about company in tech looked like it might not survive its own governance. On November 22nd, the board reversed itself. Altman was reinstated as CEO, and most of the board that had voted to remove him was replaced. The structure specifically designed to check its CEO's power had just proven, in the most public way imaginable, how little that check could actually withstand once the company underneath it became too valuable, too fast, and too tied to outside partners to simply unwind. The mission had built a safeguard. The market had just shown it who was really in control. The crisis didn't slow OpenAI down. If anything, it confirmed to every competitor watching that the race was real, and that hesitation had a cost measured in market share. Billions of dollars in fresh investment kept flowing in, valuing the company at levels that would have been unthinkable for a research lab just 2 years earlier. Google accelerated its own AI assistant, folding years of internal research into faster public releases. Well-funded rivals, including labs like Anthropic, founded by former OpenAI researchers who'd left partly over safety disagreements, pushed forward with their own increasingly capable models. Meta, Amazon, and a wave of new AI startups poured billions into the same pursuit, each unwilling to be the one left behind. The lab that once existed to slow down an unaccountable AI race had become the reason that race was now running at full speed, with nearly every major technology company on Earth chasing the moment OpenAI had created back in November 2022. The original mission hadn't disappeared. It had just learned to live inside a market it no longer fully controlled. OpenAI was never supposed to be a company racing for market share. It was supposed to be the fire alarm, the thing that went off before anyone got hurt, warning the world that something powerful was coming. He built the fire alarm. Then he lit the fire himself. Not because he stopped believing in the warning, but because he came to believe that some fires only get put out by the people brave or reckless enough to light them first. OpenAI didn't fail its mission. It proved something far more uncomfortable. Once humanity learns how to build a technology powerful enough to change everything, there may be no way to stop the race to build it. The only choice left is who reaches the finish line first. He built the fire alarm to warn the world. Then he lit the fire himself. And the world is still deciding what that means. Built.